Hey everyone, this is Adam Swan, the SOC Prime team. Welcome to October's monthly talk. I'm here with Nate Vigenti, and we're going to be talking about. There's Nate. We're going to be talking about where we get basically our ideas for rule creation, basically where we get our hypothesis from, and maybe give you some new tips and ideas of where you can build your detections. Or ideas for you to build your detections on. So we're just going to jump right into it this week. There's not going to be a challenge or anything like that. So basically, you can break where you get your ideas from into two different categories. There's your internal stuff. So this is ideas that are basically specific to your environment. So if you have a jump box or something like that administrators in the past has been compromised a lot, you know that there's administrators on that host who use dirty admin tricks and they're not so healthy. You could set up specific alerting, right, and detections for there. But in this talk, we're going to be talking more about the external stuff. So where we get ideas looking outwards at other people. So for instance, social media, looking at TAC framework, looking at use cases out there that other companies publish freely and available for you. How to pull tools down off of things like GitHub and what to look for in them for detections based on common detection sources, and then common things like blogs that we follow, and where we find research on APT malware and stuff like that. So to get started though, Nate wants to share some stuff about OSIM and Mordor. So Nate, pass the mic to you.
Yep, thanks Adam. Let's see. Yeah, you see the screen? Did this remove me from you?
You're good.
Okay.
The screen's up.
All right, so yeah, so before Adam talks about like a bunch of different projects and tools and that sort of stuff, usually I like to start with just understanding the data. Like Roberto Rodriguez, or also known like as Cyber War Dog, has talked about this a lot, right? So, you know, there's different things with schemas and data models and everything else, right? But really, before you get into machine learning and, you know, all the sort of fancy stuff, it's, you know, not only good to know like some of the ins and outs, the internals of like Windows and Linux, right? Even if you know that, need to know like how the log sources look, right? Like what kind of data are you even able to collect? You know, you start with a hypothesis around something from MITRE ATT&CK, and they've been doing a lot of, I want to preface, like they've been doing a lot of work on taking like an MITRE ATT&CK idea and then going to a log source. But I think, you know, what Roberto has done helps with that now, and I think will continue to help with that. So Mordor basically has like Windows logs and then PCAP as well. So they not only just run simulations of like maybe an offensive security tool, or they also do like actual evals. So Roberto and I ran like an APT 29 simulation. So collecting not only PCAP for that, and then Windows logs as well. So PCAP is nice to have because if you have any like network security monitoring tool, let's say Zeek or Suricata, you got Snort, maybe you have some other tools at your job, right? And you have the ability to replay PCAP. Having that PCAP of like a simulation allows you to basically use it for anything. So versus us like providing specific logs that would work with a PCAP, which want to preface like we do sometimes with Zeek. This allows people to use basically whatever they want. So could replay these PCAPs. And kind of one of my favorite NSM tools like Security Onion, then run Sigma rules or create Sigma rules on that sort of stuff. So in the next like data exploration, I'll show you by Samir is a little bit different. So he runs, and I'll get back to that slide. So he kind of does the same thing, PCAP and Windows logs. The difference between the two is that like the EVTX, aka Windows logs, is specific to what could be mapped to an attack technique or what is already predetermined as malicious, whereas Mordor kind of collects everything, you know, because we don't know 5 years from now or 6 months or 2 weeks from now, if certain Windows logs could be useful or not useful and that sort of stuff. So like with Mordor, there's a stark contrast between the two, even though they're very similar. They're both very useful. But I think it's always important to explain that difference between Mordor and something like what Samir has done, right? So like I was, you know, talking to Roberto about this recently, and you essentially, you know, you can use all sorts of, let's say you're looking for a login, like you don't have to look for just the actual Windows log that said a user logged in. You could get, you know, really creative, and maybe there's a log that says like the desktop picture was applied, you know, like you can, with Windows logs, you can have endless possibilities for different things in incident response, maybe not necessarily just hunting. So there's a big difference between the two, and that's primarily it, but both of them are very similar. And then I want to say, and I don't know if Samir like will open up contributions to his repo, but Roberto, like being the founder of the Open Threat Research or OTR community, is always trying to have, you know, contributions. So with the Mordor project, you basically can, you know, if you're running simulations or testing, you know, a piece of malware or you know, just running some PowerShell script or running Mimikatz or whatever, just testing something, right? Like Roberto has shown a way where you can collect the Windows logs and PCAP and then contribute back to Mordor and then create, you know, Jupyter notebooks, or more importantly, we always end up trying to create Sigma rules on these data sets and then share those back with the community. So I think more people contributing like to this project obviously is going to benefit everybody. And, you know, I've started to think a lot recently, the more things that are technically open, like and true to a log source or true to its original format, like you have vendors basically trying to copy these ideas, which is fine, right? But you're basically, you know, innovating for the community and pushing vendors, you know, to innovate as well. And having stuff that's open, kind of universal, like Sigma rules and everything, right? You know, 5 years from now, those things are still going to be useful. And OSIM is one more project under the OTR community, but it takes it, like the log sources, kind of a step further, and actually taking, you know, the different field names and then mapping them to a common data model. It's a little bit different than like Splunk CIM or Elastic's common schema, right? Because the biggest difference is actually mapping that original, showing the original field name to, you know, like the actual applied data model. And even if you don't use OSIM as a data model, like just having a project that has log sources and the original field names and the actual and log examples. So you can use OSIM, not even use the actual data model, but just use it as another way to explore data Let me see if I can show a quick example. So a lot of people might not be familiar with what's inside of, say, Zeek logs. So I can actually go and look. Right, I can actually go into OSIM, GitHub link, or follow just osimproject.com, pull up the Zeek logs, and then I can see the original field names, the original type, description, and then some sample values. So I think every, like for Zeek, if people are in the NSM, right, like 50 some log sources, they're all mapped. And there should be a log example for all of them, whether even it's something like MQTT, which off the top of my head, I think is like use Modbus SCADA for messaging, like SMS, cell phone sort of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of log sources. SQL is another messaging thing, but SIP, right? You got phone logs in there. So there's a lot of different things that you can use. Something like Mordor, OSIM, and then Samir's repo as well. So training data models. Roberto has done a lot like specific talks around these, so not really going to talk about these much more, but I think Adam will probably mention it further. But yeah, if you're not following him or him, then you're missing out on, being able to stand on, as I say, the shoulder of giants. So that's all I got, Adam.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Nate. So I think like one of the big takeaways with these different repositories where we can get sample logs is really we need a place to replay them, like replaying PCAPs into our tools, or replaying event logs into our SIM, so that we can actually see what alerts are or what's actually making it into the SIM, and then build Sigma rules off of that. So that's like a huge part of content development. Normally, we don't try to write anything unless we have some sort of POC or data source from something like Mordor or Samir repositories to actually like validate the content. So some of the stuff that I'm going to show you today, like definitely take that into it. Like not just don't just like look at a tweet and say, oh, they said watch out for the word hammock on the process command line, and write a rule on it. Like you probably actually want to try to actually go in and replay whatever POC is out there. So it's really vital to have a lab environment that you can do that in when you're doing content development. So
yeah, and I mean, you could, a good thing, right? Because and all rules aren't going to be bulletproof, right? Like especially as adversaries are essentially trying to just look like everybody else, or when they get administrative rights, they're really trying to look no different than a legitimate user. But between like potentially tweeting something or getting on Mordor or Sigma and just opening a GitHub issue like, hey, I'm going to create this rule. Does anybody else, see this in their environment? Kind of help eliminate some of those false positives or whatever. Get feedback from things you might never see in an environment.
Yeah, that's another huge thing. Like if you want to go and actually share things, you have to do exactly that. You have to rely on other people in the community to look, because for instance, you might have 10,000 hosts or 20,000 hosts, but you have a specific configuration in your environment that is unique to yours. And so things that happen in your environment or things that don't happen in your environment might not be the case for the community at large. So something that at SOC Prime we try to do is like every time we write this detection content, once we have the ideas, deploy in multiple different environments that are different and see what hits we're getting. So good point there.
Yeah, and I mean, having like writing a rule in Sigma, like, you know, I have a few friends that work in a few different environments of pretty large sizes, right, in the hundreds of thousands or millions of hosts. And some of the NSM stuff, like I can just share him a Sigma rule or convert it to, you know, the SIMR database he uses, and then I don't need to even share. He doesn't even need to share like what return. I'm just like, how many results? You know, did you get 1 or 100 million? But the thing I think about false positives too, like I've learned more by investigating false positives, and I don't want to say all of them, right? Because no, we have alert fatigue, but I also think in this industry we have just as big a problem as knowledge gap, if not more, than alert fatigue sometimes. But I don't know about you, Adam, but like for myself, I've learned more investigating false positives than almost anything else. So, but obviously don't chase the rabbit until you're in Alice in Wonderland. But, you know, yeah, like if something's a pretty good bulletproof rule and you're getting false positives, you can start to learn a good amount.
Yeah, and also like depending on the data source, really, false positives. Getting false positives might not be such a big deal. Like if you write a rule, like for instance, I was in an environment a little while ago where to detect things like remote desktop protocol proxying, I just had a rule to look for 3389 on the command line. And it's like to triage if something is a false positive or not for a rule like that with a rich data source like command line details, it takes less than a millisecond per rule, right? Like, you know that you're looking for some sort of like SOC proxy activity, something that's indicative of that. So like if 3389 shows up in an argument past the Chrome, like, you know that that's not what you're looking for. So it's easy to move on. So definitely, like, even if you do, sometimes the rules that we write and the content that we're generating is more of like idea based than it is alert based. So it's basically, hey, this is an idea of something that can detect something, rather than, hey, this can go to your lowest tier analyst who can just follow a playbook and you know, do the whole case without thinking, right? So like some of the content that gets out there, not so much in the public Sigma repo, but in a lot of private ones, it's like more just like idea based stuff. So
yeah, I mean, especially if you don't know like a lot about your environment, and I'm pretty sure, you know, not going to speak for everybody, but I'm pretty sure most of us probably don't know a whole lot about our environment. So like investigating some of those things is going to help you learn. Yeah. Like, for example, recently, like I've always had a rule for if the system time in Windows is changed by anything other than like the NTP executable and maybe 1 or 2 other Windows processes, and deployed that in an environment, and, you know, got false positives for like the Lenovo, I don't know, pre-packaged system driver updater and a few other things. And yeah, sure, I got false positives, but just by that rule returning hits, I was able to determine that pretty much that entire environment has no baseline, like no sort of policy for, you know, just junkware being uninstalled. They obviously don't have like a gold image or a master image, whatever, for their Windows hosts. Some of the other returns were for things, people with admin rights, just installing software and not, you know, installing Microsoft Office or something, installing like middleware, something in between, like should be corporate allowed or this shouldn't be allowed. So essentially just by those results returning, I could glean information that, okay, this environment, everybody can just do whatever they want. And that really changes how you defend a network. You know, Adam and I have worked like on an all admin network where got 500 people that that have administrative rights to do whatever they want. Like that really changed the way that we did detection. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and pivot over to like more resources that you can use. So let me send this. So the rest of this talk is going to be more like actual resources, things that we look at regularly. Not everything, but just a sampling of different areas that we're looking. So one of the easiest places to get detection content is a lot of SIM vendors like Elastic, Splunk, Chronicle, Sentinel. They put out detection rules regularly that can easily be translated to something for your SIM. So you just have to maybe learn a little bit about how their language works, but potentially not. A lot of times it's in pretty much like plain English, right? So we can look at the rules for that Elastic has here. Let's say that we were interested in GCP or something like this. We can come in and you can see that they already have all the logic here for Elastic. And like, let's say you're using Splunk, go ahead and there's nothing stopping you from taking this query here and getting it to work for Splunk, for instance. There's not a problem. Or if you want to, you could go ahead and take this and write it straight into something like Sigma. And now it can be used for any SIM that has a backend that is open, right? Or any SIM that Sigma has a backend for. So yeah, this is like
just don't sell it in a product.
Yeah. So exactly, I was going to get into that. The one thing about borrowing use cases is that like a lot of these are protected by open source licensing that basically says, hey, you can do what you will with it. You just can't sell it, and you can't
keep the author.
Yeah, keep the author. For instance, that's one with Sigma. So it's just if you're there's nothing keeping you, and even for the most part, from a private enterprise, from taking these queries here and deploying it in your own environment in whatever SIM you use, right? So the logic is already here for you. Sentinel also has a repo. So this is the GitHub for Elastic. It's just Elastic detection rules. But pretty much every major SIM today has something like this. So Azure Sentinel has their hunting queries. So like if you're interested in syslog, you can come here, and theirs are a little bit more difficult to parse and take apart. But for the most part, like you can see here, it's like where command line contains nice hash miner. So probably like you can write this as a Linux Sigma rule looking for process args with nice hash miner or ETH miner or equihash or whatever they have here. So again, it's the same thing. Like if you're pulling from these public repos, a lot of them have restrictions on how you can use their content, but for the most part, you're free to take it, put it into whatever SIM you have or Sigma, and then use it in your own private enterprise.
Just don't sell it. Yeah.
So there's one. Another one that's probably obvious is just going to TAC. So TAC obviously has their matrix, and if you have something set up where you're tracking what coverage you have, look at the ones that you don't have coverage for. Look at the resources that are there. So if you don't have anything for indirect command execution in your environment, you can scroll down to the bottom, and there's always a bunch of references here that kind of go into more detail about what's happening. But then they have like a little bit of a detection blob here, but you're probably going to get more from actual real life usage of this technique, right? And then you can build queries off of that. So something that that we do here as well. There's a bunch of social media accounts out there. Nate talked about a few of them. Cyber War Dog, Samir. So here's Samir's, who works for Elastic. He constantly is sharing detection ideas. Pretty much his entire Twitter is just that. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and follow some of these people and get some ideas if you haven't heard of them yet. Another good idea is like following more offensive people. So we have, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, so I'll just use his handle, OG Tweet. He is always posting like quick tips for more red team stuff. So like here, you could easily write a rule for this using PowerShell or even command line probably to detect this technique that he's sharing, which is apparently to dump kernel memory, yeah, via PowerShell. So you could easily take this one tweet and turn it into a Sigma rule. And then there's some like aggregator social media accounts out there. The favorite one for me is Directory Ranger. I think like as far as aggregations of previous talks and good articles and stuff like this, I think Directory Ranger takes like the cake in my opinion. Yeah, almost only ever talking about security and really resharing stuff that are like the golden nuggets. Often find things in there that that I didn't know or research that I missed. So it's super useful. And then like obviously Nate, me, and then another individual is on Twitter here. So we have Ring 3 API, and he shares a bunch of stuff regarding, again, a lot of it is aggregations, but also detection ideas and using sysmon and stuff like that. So those are some, I'm not going to just spend the rest of the talk talking about different social media accounts, but if you're not on social media, Twitter specifically, like go ahead and create an account, look at, like you can look at who I'm following or who Nate is following and get a good idea of who's out there sharing interesting things. Like both of our Twitters are almost solely on security. So we try to follow the best people. Another idea is looking for offensive tools on GitHub repositories. So for instance, if you're worried about people targeting your Azure, you might search for Azure offensive Azure tool on Google or something like that, and you might come across PowerAzure. So PowerAzure is basically a product that allows you to attack Azure, Microsoft Azure, and they have a bunch of modules that they like for reconnaissance and for persistence and all that kind of stuff. So you can take a look at these. You can take a look at the code right here and like start pulling it apart and alerting on some interesting things. So one thing I think I've shared in the past is, but I'll share it again, is when you are writing detections, especially on code itself, like it's not the best idea to pick things that can be easily changed. So for instance, all function names are like trivial to change. I always like to pick things that are more syntax based. So something that that wouldn't be so easy for them to change. Like sometimes, let's see here. Yeah, like they're probably gonna have a harder time. Let me just, sometimes you can, like right here, this is a good example of maybe something that that you could match on. Like if you match on this and then you match on maybe another instance of a bunch of symbols and more syntax based stuff, like after that. So like if you say, hey, if it contains this value and it contains, let's keep going. Let's keep, yeah. Well, you get the idea. Like you want to pick more syntax-based stuff, and not so much like strings that are easily changed. So the more you go off of the syntax of the script, the more likely you're going to actually detect it if they go ahead and change a bunch of stuff on you. So let's go back here. So another here's just another one is in packet. So a lot of times, like process creation rules are really simple to write if you haven't written them before. You can go into like a tool like InPacket like this and just do a search in the repository. Search this code, which is search here for command. And a lot of times, just do command.exe. You'll find that they're running, yeah, like here's args like specific to InPacket for this @exe.py. Like, sure, it's a Python command.exe, so it's going to cause these creations. So you can just go in here and pull these arguments and write a rule off of them. Or obviously, even better would be to pull down InPacket, run it in a lab environment and see what actually gets created. But this would definitely give you an idea like, oh, there's probably an easy rule that can be created here, right? And then like, of course, if someone posts a POC, for instance, this is for zero logon, you can run this in a lab environment. Always run it in a lab environment, probably one at the beginning. That's unless like, because sometimes there's like two different types of exploits that get posted to POC types that get uploaded to GitHub. There's ones that are already compiled, like they'll just upload a DLL or an executable that's compiled code, and you can't pull it apart on your own unless you put in something like IDA, right? So, and then you have to know reverse engineering to look at it. But like something like this, you can, if you're savvy enough to understand Python, you can probably read through here and get an idea if it's doing something more nefarious or not. But generally, like, especially the ones that are already compiled, like you only ever want to run those in a lab environment. Do not run that crap in production, or you're gonna get bit in the future. So, but you can pull these down and run them against a lab. That's how I created my rule for zero logon quickly. Was the company who, forget the name of the company now, but the company who identified the vulnerability, released a POC light, I would say, script to actually exploit it, kind of. And that was how we were able to write the rule so quickly. It was because once they released that, it was a matter of minutes, really. The rule was easy to write for Zeek by doing just this, downloading it off their GitHub page, running it in a lab, and then writing the rule. There's always like, it's always good to keep an eye out on offensive red team blogs. So like a really common one is i.redteam, and they have examples of actually how to build different macros, and well, not just macros, they have different quick walkthroughs for all sorts of things. So the chances that you might run into these sorts of malicious files or these techniques in your environment are probably increased just because there's this open documentation on how to accomplish it. So go ahead and not only, you know, hey, it's i.redteam, but I.blueteam, and I'm going to go ahead and look at what these red teamers are sharing with each other and steal their, well, not steal, but, you know, take take some ideas of what we can detect then from these pages. So another place to constantly be looking is people who post stuff in red team blogs. Or there's some people like Vincent who compile like red team tips, and these can be quickly like written up as, a lot of these can be quickly written up as simple process creation type rules. So they're saying, hey, is EDR looking for a PowerShell encoded command? Well, try PowerShell TAC EC, or try netuse/dom instead of domain. So like one of the things that's nice about when people start trying to obfuscate their commands, like if someone in an environment uses netusers/domain, that could be completely benign. But if someone is using netuse/dom, like that's really unusual usage of netuse, and so the chances of it being malicious are much higher. So this is especially true when people start throwing in, like, there's a lot of red teamers out there, or people who have brought up that Sigma, a lot of the rules can be bypassed by adding carets or DOSfuscation type stuff to the commands. Well, as a blue teamer, I'm like, please add that stuff. Please, because if you just do netusers/domain, then you know, it might be 50-50 if it's legitimate or not. But if you do netusers/domain, and domain is split up by a bunch of carets because you're trying to obfuscate it, well, that all gets collected on the command line, and I'm going to see that as a defender. So that instantly tells me, okay, this is malicious, right? Because no administrator is taking the time to add characters to their commands. They have stuff to do. So thank you for doing that. And now it's made my job a lot easier. So, but anyways, red team tips type list. This is a very popular one from Vincent Yu, I think his name is pronounced. And there's also blue team blogs out there, or more blue team blogs like AD Security. So this is Sean Metcalf's blog, and he posts a lot about attacking and defending Active Directory. So definitely someone to pay attention to. I try to read every blog that he posts as soon as it's posted. So and then like big vendors, for instance, Microsoft, they have their security blog. They should have threat intelligence. Oh, I think I got the wrong link, but they have a threat intelligence. There we go, security intelligence blog. Yeah, so here it is. They have this blog, a lot of vendors out there who perform MSSP services, or they have an EDR, or they provide threat hunting services. They have blogs, and definitely pay attention to them because they're seeing stuff that's attacking companies like you, and they're sharing a lot of it for free. And you can build your own detections in your own environment, even though they might say at the end of the thing, use Microsoft Sentinel or Microsoft ATP to detect this. Like, there's a lot of takeaways you can get from this research to use in whatever SIM you have, right? So it's a place to look. And then finally, like, there's services out there that kind of aggregate this information, like MITRE TAC, for instance. A lesser known page of MITRE TAC is their software page. So if you're hearing about, I don't know, say Bond Updater, they have all the techniques that are associated with this malware, but then there'll be references down here and you can read them. And a lot of times the references are like reverse engineering reports or APT reports about their activity, and you can build detections off of the reporting. So Another one is the Malpedia, which is pretty commonly known that we like to use. So anytime someone says like, hey, I'm concerned about this adversary, a lot of times we'll start obviously with open source and see what other people are writing about them. So you can look up like deep Panda, and if you click it, they'll provide a bunch of reporting on that APT. So like if we click on this one, you can see here's some reporting that was put out publicly, and there's probably stuff in here that we could use to write detections if we wanted to. So, all right, that was kind of the gauntlet of different areas that we look. So, Nate, did you have anything else to add to that, or?
Yeah, I was gonna tell you time, but I created a bit.ly link for all this for these resources. So a few of the slides I had, and then a bunch of Twitter people to follow on Twitter, or these are their GitHub links too, and then the other resources you had. But oddly enough, if anybody feels like that was too much information, that's kind of why a while back I created a repo, the TMI InfoSec, or too much information in security, that has curated list of like data sets and sites you can use for sandboxes or URL analysis and other stuff. So, but yeah, here's the link to these slides instead of having to watch your whole recording, Adam. But yeah, no, I don't have anything else.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let me make the announcement. I'm gonna share the link real quickly. So that's the link, and
yeah.
So we have some questions, and or just one really is how to create minor techniques detection queries from an r-pandy. Yeah, so to create, like, it really depends on the technique, right? Because they're all unique. So you might, let me go back here quickly to attack. And I'll try to give you some pointers there.
I think that just honestly probably won't do a better idea than or explanation other than the recent blog that they had. But yeah.
Yeah. So in here they
duplicate a great explanation.
Yeah. Well, do you have a link to that blog? You can share it. But
I replied in the Q&A.
Okay. Yeah. So if you like, for each technique, they have all these resources on here. So it's really just a matter of reading the resource and replaying some of the stuff in your lab. But I think a lot of people overlook these resources at the bottom, which is pretty much where I go straight away whenever I hit a technique. I peruse through this stuff and pay attention a little bit to the detection, but mostly I'm going to the references to see how it's actually been used. Because a lot of times that will give you access, like a lot of people include bits of adversary code in their reporting and stuff like that. So it actually gives you a more clear understanding of what's happening. Let's see it. Feel free to use the Q&A tool. Otherwise, that's all we have for today. So
yeah, did you have anything or anybody else on the team?
Nope. Okay. Well, we hope you found some of this interesting and useful, and have a great rest of your week and a nice week. Yep,
And then
bye.
post any comments on the YouTube video or whatnot after those get posted, which I think I'll said pretty soon. So
Yeah.
next day or so. I don't know how much we need to edit out, how much embarrassing stuff we said or did, but yep. Yeah,
It's okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.